What's good, y'all? Welcome back to the Playmaker's Corner podcast. I'm your host for today, Simon Villanos, aka Coach V. This is episode 510. It is April 8th, 2026 when I am recording this intro, and we have our rankings and recognitions episode here. It's going to look a little bit different. I will say that we'll still do, our recognitions, obviously our rankings as well as things heat up, but we are going to focus a little bit more on the postseason, on the outlook, and preview that a little bit here on this episode. But without further ado, let's just go ahead and get right into it. Alrighty, now let's get to Playmaker of the Week. This goes to the player that had the biggest impact in a win, obviously, from this past week here. I believe it is week 8. Yep, from this past week 8. And as always, there's so many great players. We went ahead and we narrowed it down just a little bit. We narrowed it down to 2 here, really, that we were taking seriously for Playmaker of the Week, because there are some pretty big wins that these players were able to contribute to. And honestly, the quality of the win does matter. And so let's just start with this one right here. Out of Midland, we have Olivia Dominguez-Millsap, 2 receptions, 46 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown. And then defensively also came up with 2 big interceptions, 2 flagpoles, and 2 pass breakups in a key 12-0 win over Baker. Obviously a big part of that defense, and has been a big part really of this team for the last 3 or 4 years here. And I want to say that this was their senior night as well, so good for them. And, she just played great in this massive upset here over Baker, who, there was probably an argument for them to be near the top of the KCAC or the top team coming out of the KCAC, but with a win like this for Midland, that does put some of that into question. So there you go there. And there were a lot of great performances from that game, but Olivia Dominguez-Millsap is definitely somebody that we had to consider. Now, the other player we had to consider was from another great game in the Conference Carolinas, though, and that was Lise McRae's quarterback Mackenzie Hicks versus Barton College. And really looking at this, we could have went a couple different ways here. Kennedy Van Noy had a great game. Natalia Hernandez de Leon had herself a game as well. But, having watched this game and covered it, make sure you peep that recap from last episode 509. I really felt like Mackenzie Hicks had a signature game here. 30 of 43, 351 yards, 4 touchdowns, no turnovers, 39 rushing yards, and a rushing touchdown. Was absolutely on fire, would not let Barton get comfortable here, and just kept scoring, against a Barton defense that's not that bad at all. But for Lise McRae, they needed a win like this to continue to work themselves up the conference rankings here, as it's real jumbled up right now, and this one definitely complicates things as Lise McRae gets a big one here. And so Mackenzie Hicks, definitely somebody that we had to consider for Playmaker of the Week. But per usual, there can only be one Playmaker of the Week. So your 2026 Week 8 Playmaker of the Week is Midland's Olivia Dominguez-Millsap versus Baker here. First off, I will say this. I feel like it's been a really long time since Midland has had a Playmaker of the Week. They have won one before, but it has been a couple years, and, I just wanted to shout her out. She has been such a big part of this team. Really, her and that group of seniors has been such a big part of this Midland program, as they have went through so many changes and ups and downs. But at the end of the day, because of how good this group is, led by Olivia Dominguez-Millsap here, they were able to be consistent these last couple years. And that is something that you cannot say about every program just straight up here. But they have consistently won. They've consistently been a team that has pushed other squads here. And this is arguably the biggest win in Midland flag football history. I would say today. I don't know. Is that saying too much? Maybe there's some recency bias for sure. I'd have to go through and look through every single season again. But this is definitely the biggest win this season. And, we just felt like that this upset was just a little bit bigger of a deal than Lise McRae beating Barton, which we knew was going to be a close game for sure. But this was, just a great one for Midland to get, especially at home. Gotta love that. And so there you go, right there. Your Week 8 Playmaker of the Week from Midland is Olivia Dominguez Millsap. Alrighty, so a quick update on our fantasy points / fantasy league update. Because I know in the past couple weeks, we have been updating those stats and, just highlighting the players who had the biggest statistical impact. Make sure you check all that out. Moving forward, we're actually gonna stop doing that. We're gonna pick it up next year again, hopefully. That's definitely the plan. But right now, as we go ahead and focus a little bit more on the postseason and individual programs and whatnot, we definitely want to just make sure we shift our energy here. But it was a great deal. Shout out all the teams that put in stats. I feel like this season, there was a record number of teams that are putting in stats, and we will always appreciate that. That allows us to tell, another side of the story, help the stories that we are trying to tell for your programs, your athletes, your players as well. And so we really appreciate that. And so shout out all the programs that are putting in stats, and hopefully you still do, because it definitely helps us in our coverage of your program and players. Will say this: congratulations to Gino. He did win our fantasy league here. Myself and Cody, we picked our teams and whatnot, and Gino did as well, and Gino just happened to win the most games in the weeks that we were able to do this here at 3. So we're going to end it right there. And, hey, shout out Gino. Really, and Gino will probably want to shout these people out, but shout out the Warner receivers, having the whole receiving core over there doing their thing, and then obviously everyone else on his team. And I'm just going to name them all off here. Anna Vincentini, Bridget Kaiser, Sanaya Waller, Jessica Finley, Caitlin Sigmundy, Janasia Wilson, Anna Anderson, Tatiana Dos Santos, Avalon Lux Offerman, Ania Morales, Lazariana Herrera, Ashton Weirley, Valerie Ainge-Bata, and then these players that were also on his team, but he had to drop to pick up other players, but Olivia Cadis, Carly Yoakley, and the Ottawa defense. So there you go. That is your update for now. Like I said, we want to focus a little bit more on the postseason as we are on the back end of that right now for most teams. All right, now let's go ahead and talk a little bit about rankings here. In case you don't know, myself and the other rankers here, we each individually rank teams 1 through 25. So if you hear in the reasons that, some of us have some teams ranked higher than others, well, that's why, right? But basically, if somebody ranks a team at number 1, they get 25 points. That program does 2, 24, 3, 23, and so on and so on. And then I add up all the points, and the team with the most points make our top 25. And so you'll see some teams that are tied. That just basically means they have the same amount of points. That's just how we average it out there. So there you go. That's how that works here. Before we talk about this week, week 8, let's talk about last week real quick here. Here were the teams that were just outside. We had Midland, Immaculata, Roberts Wesley, and Ventura College, and Marymount. And then at 25, we had a tie, Campbellsville and Eastern. 24, Lisa McGray. 23, Saddleback. 22, Aurora. 21, Thomas. Tied at 19 was Huntington and Gallaudet. At 18 was Lindsey Wilson. 17, Weber. 16, Daytona State. 15, Life. Tied at 13 was St. Francis and Wingate. 12, Ferrum. 11, Hope. 10, Barton College. 9, Nevada State. 8, Kansas Wesleyan. 7, St. Thomas. 6, Baker. 5, Ottawa. 4, Milligan. 3, Florida Gateway. 2, Kaiser. And at number 1 still is Warner. And so that's how that goes right there. And like I said, we all have differing opinions on certain teams. So you'll hear some of us have ranked teams higher than others. But our PMC rankings are the average of all of that. And so let's go ahead and get started here. Let's start with the teams that were just outside. We have a number of them: Ventura, Campbellsville, Immaculata, Midland, Gallaudet, and Marymount. Let's go ahead and start with Ventura here. Our friend at Women's College Flag Football, make sure you check out their website and their social media at Women's College Flag Football. Said this about Ventura: if Ventura played Saddleback today, I might take Ventura. So there you go. Campbellsville was another team that received votes but was just outside. I believe this is what Cody had to say about them: barely keeping the Tigers in here in his rankings, despite the season probably being over, and thus they might fall out. But this game against Lindsey Wilson was a lot more inspiring than the first, and I gotta agree. It's definitely, a sign of improvement here. We'll talk more about postseason chances later here, but by all means, you had a lot of changes. They are currently on pace to be where they were last season, so it's not the worst, considering I know they had some injuries and a coaching change. So it is what it is. Now, after that is Immaculata. This is what Gino had to say. A season split with Marymount and a loss to Eastern is looking and a loss to Eastern is a great look in the Atlantic East, and I gotta agree. It's gonna be interesting down the line though to see if they could continue to improve and get better. Because they're gonna have to play some of those teams again come conference tournament and whatnot. But for now, they're in an okay position. Not quite top 25 though. Then moving on, we have Midland. This is what Cody had to say, firing Midland up here because the impact of the Baker win could have insane ripple effects felt through the rest of the season. And yeah, I gotta agree. I will do a separate segment probably right after this talking about the postseason, and I'll talk about multiple postseason outlooks and whatnot there. But Midland, that's first off, I want to say that was their last home game, so not a bad way to send off your seniors. This is a special group of seniors. They really set the tone for that culture over there. That's been their core for multiple years, and they've competed at a high level. They've competed against some of the best in the country, and so you got to give them a lot of credit. I feel like sometimes they get overlooked just a little bit, but that was a very quality win over Baker, who really it didn't seem like they were missing anybody, so shout out them, and we'll see what that postseason holds for them. Now, moving on, we have Gallaudet, and everyone talked about Gallaudet here. Women's college flag football said no shame in a 1-point loss to Ferrum. That's a great team. Villa is also a great team with 2 more wins here. Talking about Villa Maria. Gino said almost pulled off a huge win over Ferrum. I am definitely bought in on the squad. And then Cody said this team absolutely battled Ferrum to the end and punched, I'd argue, above their weight class in a Titan-esque manner that keeps them in my top 25. I don't know if Ferrum is that much farther above their weight class here. Gallaudet has been around a lot longer at least than them. Not a bad showing. I will say that's probably a win, at least for me in my rankings. That's probably a win you want to have to stay in the top 25. I don't know if they're going to be challenged like that again. So we'll see. And then last but not least, just out is Marymount. Cody said they won games. That's the comment. And then women's college flag football said early losses to Immaculata and Mercyhurst aside, this is the only team to beat Eastern, and I agree with that. That is the only team to beat Eastern as of right now. So there you go. Now let's go ahead and get into our top 25 here. Starting at 25, technically we have a 3-way tie, so it's technically tied for 23rd here between Daytona State, Saddleback, and Thomas. Kind of a interesting group. Let's go ahead and start with Thomas though, who does move down a couple of spots here. Cody says this shrugged off the water game to take out their anger on Reinhardt and bumped up a spot for them. I think when it comes to Thomas, there are just other teams that are a little bit more active, and so that does help their rankings, just by a little bit. They only played Reinhardt, and it was their senior day, so I'm glad they got a big win there. But then they get Point and Bruden Parker. Like I said, I said this either last week or 2 weeks ago. They should probably win the rest of this schedule here. I think their next biggest games will be in the Sun Conference Tournament, and I believe they should make it. We'll see. I don't know what that format will be looking like exactly, but I think they should make it, and they'll be just fine. So there you go. They're tied at 23, so there's that. Now the other team is Saddleback here, who's tied with them. They stay right here. They don't move up or down. This is what Gino had to say about them, back in the top 25, and should be up there with Ventura for top Cali JUCO squads. Women's college flag football says not the undefeated season they had going, but this is the team to be in the California JUCOs, maybe in the state here. I would argue Hope is up there as well, but they have definitely been successful this season. I don't know, a couple losses isn't going to derail that. They have a lot more wins. And then tied with them is Daytona State, who has kind of a big drop here, down 7 spots. And, let's go ahead and talk about it. Women's College Flag Football said at least looked more competitive with Florida Gateway this time. And then Cody said still had to drop this squad a few spots here despite these battles with Florida Gateway getting closer and closer. And I will say Gino did drop them out of his top 25 completely here. I know he personally has not been able to shake that first Florida Gateway loss, and then this one just wasn't enough for him. I'll be honest, we're going to preview the postseason here in a little bit. I think Florida Gateway will probably be a favorite in that postseason Women's College Flag Finals because they're going to take away the top NAIA teams. There's that. I think, Florida Gateway is probably going to be the top contender there. And so if that's really your worst loss, if you're looking at Daytona State and what they got going on, 9-3 on the season, lost to Florida Gateway twice, lost to a good UCF team once by 1 point, but then they killed Penn State Schuylkill, right? They took out Siena Heights. They beat Lise McRae, who is ranked above them currently right now, and has beaten Barden, and I don't think that's something you could forget. So for me, I still have them ranked. I think I actually have them ranked the highest out of everyone here. I think Daytona State is just fine. It's just tough when you're comparing them to Florida Gateway. And to be honest with you, my personal opinion, I think they're a lot higher than 23. But that's just me. So there you go. So there is that. But that's our three teams tied at 23 right there, right at the end. Daytona State, Saddleback, and Thomas. Let's move on to 22 here, where we have a team that wasn't ranked before, but was getting votes and ranks from the rest of us here. And that is Roberts Wesleyan, who moves up to 22 right now. This is what everyone had to say about them, starting with Gino. Unbeaten, and there's not an end in sight to their destruction of the Upper East Coast. Our friend at Women's College Flag Football says seems to be the team to beat in the Northeast. Scores are impressive, and Villa's only loss has been to Roberts. And yeah, for a first-year program, they're doing really well. I would maybe argue, how tough the comp is up there, but undefeated is undefeated, and they are winning by a lot, so got to give them the respect here as they continue to move up here. That would be an interesting team as we go into that Women's College Flag Finals here. We'll see if they go or not, or get selected or not. There's that as well. Now, moving on to 21, we have Eastern, who moves up 4 spots here ahead of Marymount. Gino said this: the Marymount loss is stranger and stranger by the week, but Eastern is kicking butt right now, no doubt. Women's College Flag Football says only lost to a great Marymount team, otherwise would be in the elite tier of teams. So there you go. At 20 is Huntington, who moves down a spot. They didn't really play, though. So there is that. Gino says this: only questionable loss was to a good Campbellsville team. Otherwise, this is a top 10 resume. And, considering Campbellsville is not currently ranked here, they are just outside our top 25. I think this is probably a decent spot for a Huntington for now. Now at 19 is Lise McRae, who goes ahead and shoots up 5 spots here. Cody says McRae finds themselves back in the top 25 amidst the upset of Barden and making the Conference Carolinas feel wide open heading into the last few games and Conference Carolinas tournament coming down the road. Women's College Flag Football says look close and the resume begins to resemble St. Francis, Life, Thomas, etc. Huge win over Barden. Gino says Lise McRae has been climbing my rankings rapidly for a couple weeks now, and that Barden game was an absolute awesome showing on both sides of the ball. Mackenzie Hicks and the offense balled out, plus the defense was forcing turnovers per usual. Yeah, I've said it, I've really liked this Lise McRae team before here. I think they're probably a couple of spots better than this. Their offense has really started clicking the last couple weeks here. Mackenzie Hicks looked really good, albeit there are definitely some gunslinger moments, and probably not in a good way, but then there are some really great gunslinger moments, and that's just what you get, when you have a quarterback like that. But she's played at a very high level. The receivers, Van Noy, Natalia Hernandez de Leon, Alvarado, all of them. We knew what to expect from Van Noy and Hernandez de Leon. Haven't seen them last year, but they've really taken a step forward in their game. And, I think if anything in that Barden game, they've shown that they can win the Conference Carolinas. So there you go. Now, I wouldn't call them a favorite or really anybody. It'd be really hard to pick a favorite out of the Conference Carolinas right now. But, they're doing their thing. That was a really good game that they played. Make sure you check out that recap, which I actually did. So there you go. Now, at 18 is Weber. They do move down a single spot here. Women's College Flag Football says they just keep losing. Gino says play Kaiser a lot closer than most teams do, but Weber's tough late season schedule is going to bite them this year. And then Cody says this team really fought Kaiser close and tough, but need a win to fall back in favor here. And look, I thought they gave Kaiser a very good game here. You can look at Kaiser's schedule. There are not many teams that are doing that currently. But for Weber, it's just tough. I don't know. It's tough seeing them lose to Life 12-13, get blown out by Thomas 6-45, and then you play a team like Kaiser 12-20, right? And if you look at Kaiser, I don't know if they have really that many close games or as of right now, teams who have played them that close. Ottawa is their closest game, which they lost, So I feel like that just shows the range of Weber here, when they're on it, when they're really, really on it, like no turnovers and whatnot, or at least, limiting turnovers, and, they're locked in. They probably have the upside of one of these contenders. I would say for sure has the upside of one of these contenders. But the inconsistency is definitely something that you can't forget. It is there, but you also can't forget, some of these close games like this one. And so I want to make sure to give Weber some love right there, because they will probably ruin somebody's postseason if they are not ready for that and not taking them seriously. And, it's a long tournament, so that makes that a lot more likely. I'm just saying. So there you go. At 17, and that's both tournaments, by the way, just saying. Now, at 17 is Aurora, who does move up 5 spots here. Women's College Flag Football says, anybody know why they canceled games with the best team on their schedule? Word is Illinois Wesleyan wants the game. I won't say Illinois Wesleyan is the best team left on their schedule here, but they're definitely a quality team to play, and probably one of the better ones on their schedule for sure. That would be a good game to watch here. Gino says, in the emerging Midwest college flag football scene, Aurora is emerging as one of the best. And yes, as of right now, they are emerging as one of the best. I am looking just a little bit ahead because, they brought up the whole schedule thing. I am curious. Just, humor me just a little bit here. I'm curious to see if they're going to play these games against Campbellsville on the 17th and Lindsey Wilson on the 18th here. I know they are not in a conference, Campbellsville and Lindsey Wilson, but it's definitely interesting because I think those games will definitely be challenging, and I think that would give me a better idea of where Aurora is, to be realistic with you, because I don't know if they are a spot better than Weber good as of right now. But that's just me. So there you go. Now tied at 15, we have Life and Barden College here. Life, same spot. Barden does drop a little bit. Let's talk about Life here. Women's College Flag Football says the best 5-loss team in the country could be anybody. And I actually agree with that. That is a very specific number as well. But they're kind of like Weber, where they got a very wide range of play, I would say. And they depending on the team that shows up, they could compete with a very wide range of teams. Is probably the better way of saying that. So there you go. Cody says rolled on from that Lindsey Wilson win into another pair of wins that very much could look back at some of those games from earlier, but could still be eligible for the invite, not to NAIA, but the other tournament. And I mean, yeah, for sure. And then Gino says 2 very nice wins this week to jump a spot in my rankings. Yeah, Life will be an interesting team here. Before the postseason, tournaments and whatnot, we'll probably do a preview and really look back at the teams and talk about them and analyze, how good they really are for sure. So there's that. And Life's analysis would be an interesting one, I think. Just looking at some of their games a little bit closer here. Now, tied at 15 with them is Barton College, who does move down a couple spots here. Let's start with women's college flag football. Lisa McRae proved tough. Schedule early paid off here. Lisa McRae proved their tough schedule early on paid off. Not a bad loss for Barton, but 2 losses is worse than 1. Agreed. Gino says turnovers were definitely an issue, but this team needs a clear number 1 receiver by next year to help out the offense. I will dispute that in a minute here. Cody says despite the loss to Lisa McRae, I'm still high on Barton and the potential of this squad here. I will say this. I think there's a clear number 1, and it's Valerie Ainge-Bada. But, I think it becomes obvious that she's your number 1 when she starts tearing up other teams and she gains a lot more focus. And so the numbers may not always reflect that. But even then, they have other great receivers like Zania Long, Deja Reed, Ailoni Basa, I feel like could probably get a couple more looks as well. And Bada, I think, just makes amazing plays here and she draws a lot of attention. She's the number 1 receiver. They lost this game not because of their receivers, but because of Sawyer Rigdon. Now, before you hate on me, I'm also going to say they're in this game because of Sawyer Rigdon as well. Made some great plays after those early turnovers and got them back in it. Even gave them the lead as well. You could argue the defense also was another issue, and I would probably say that as well. They lost a lot of one-on-one matchups. And you obviously can't do that. You can't do that. But at the end of the day, let me retract that statement just a little bit. I don't think it was just on Sawyer Rigdon, but they had opportunities to win it. And, at the end of the day, they had a younger quarterback who just today did not make those plays. Now, could she make those plays, later on in the season? Did she make those plays before in the season? Yeah, absolutely, right? But you got to find that consistency as a young quarterback, and she's still finding her way. Now, if this is a misstep and they go perfect from here on out, I would not be surprised at all. I think she's a great quarterback, and definitely somebody that could be an annual MVP candidate and maybe even be a multi-time winner. But right now, or at least in that Lisa McRae game, they just got outplayed. And I think they could play better than that. I don't think they're less talented at all. I think they could definitely play better than what they put up against Lisa McRae. So we'll see what happens with Barton College here. I think they have plenty of talent here. I don't know if they were as mentally locked in as Lisa McRae. And, they were playing away too. So there's that as well in the rain. But you got to overcome that stuff if you want to continue to win and be a consistent winner. And so we'll see. That's an interesting team right there. I think like a lot of these teams in this teenage range here, and by teenage range, I mean like 13 through 19, they have a very wide range of teams that they could beat. And that's not a bad thing. So there you go. Now at 14 is Lindsey Wilson, who moves up a couple of spots here. Let's start with Cody. He says massive win over Campbellsville in an absolute dogfight to keep hope alive, but lots of football still left to play. Agreed there. Gino says Lindsey Wilson avoided a loss to Campbellsville, plus they will climb a few spots after some teams lost this week. And then women's college flag football said impressive wins, and some of the best teams in the country have lost to Life and Ferrum here, and I gotta agree with that. Lindsey Wilson, another young team, similar to Barton with a young quarterback and whatnot, had a little bit of a tougher week last week, but bounced back and played well, and that's just the nature of this thing. And so that'll be a really fun team to watch. We're going to the national tournament here, or, the national postseason tournament, both of them in May, and I will actually only be able to go to the Saturday games there, and I really hope I get to watch Lindsey Wilson play. I'm just putting that out there. So, there you go. Now, at 13, still here, same spot, is Wingate. This is what everyone said. Women's college flag football said, can't wait to see who comes out of the Conference Carolinas tournament. Wouldn't be surprised to see Wingate. Agreed there. Gino says with Barden's loss, Wingate is now at the top of the Conference Carolinas. And then Cody says picked up a pair of wins here. I mean, I didn't think they were going to lose this week. Lisa McRae beating Barden did open the door for them to take that one spot here, as Barden is now at 2, I believe. We'll talk about postseason implications later here. But for Wingate, I will say this. I think they got back Maddie Jones, which is a pretty big deal here. So she's back. As far as Sailor Swanson, their starting quarterback goes, I'm not going to put anything out there that I don't know for sure. But I wouldn't be surprised if she's done for the season here and they just kind of go with the medical red shirt and move on. Especially seeing that, they're trying out a couple different quarterback options here. Janelle Francis obviously got a decent amount of snaps still, and that's still going to happen whether she's at quarterback or somewhere else. But you also have Haley Bowie there who did her thing. Did not look too bad, at least statistically, did not look too bad, but she's also catching passes as well. We will see if these last 2 games that they played impact, who starts for them moving forward, if that has a tipping scale on who ends up starting moving forward. Because I do think adding a Janelle Francis as a receiving option with Addie Cadwell, who had 7 touchdowns in a game, Yvonne Brussel, who is consistently arguably one of the best players, period, in the entire country, adding a Francis to that trio right there, I mean, that's really good. There's going to be a lot of teams that just simply can't guard that. And so we'll see what happens. That's definitely something to keep in mind here. Moving on at 12 is St. Francis, who moves up a spot. I don't think they played this week, though. But Gino does say this. They've got weapons all over the field and have multiple key wins this year. Women's college flag football says this team looks deadly right now. Birth trough fire. So there you go there. Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see where they end up as far as the postseason goes, which tournament they are able to play in. Just looking at the rest of their schedule here moving forward, they don't have too many games. Oh, well, on their schedule, it says actually they have exactly 1. But it does say Siena Heights Invitational, so I assume they're going to play more than just Wittenberg here. And if they do, that'll definitely be interesting. We'll see what happens. I don't know if that's old or not, though, because I could have swore Siena Heights hosted something earlier this year. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. But, for a first-year program, right now they're 8-4. No matter what, they're going to have a winning record here before the postseason, and I think that's definitely something to like. And, they played and beat some pretty good teams here. Thomas, that's a key win right there. Played St. Thomas relatively close, 32-20. Beat Weber, another key win right there. Beat Graceland, Midland, Campbellsville. Life is another key win. First year Cumberland. It's a good season for St. Francis. If you're St. Francis, you look at this schedule, you look at this year, and I think you could be really satisfied and optimistic about what you have going on over there. And I mean, add another year of recruiting. This team could very well be a contender here soon, if not a dark horse right now. Just putting that out there. Now at 11 is Ferrum, who does move up slightly here. Cody says squeezed out some thrillers of wins to retain their spot. Gino says Ferrum is definitely hoping to get another shot at Wingate in the Conference Carolinas tournament. And then Women's College Flag Football said someone finally took down Gallaudet. Big W for Ferrum. Tone setter for Conference Carolinas. And I agree there. We'll see if they could maintain that type of play going into the postseason here. Now at 10, to go ahead and round us out, is Hope, who moves up a spot here. I want to say this is their first time in the top 10. And Women's College Flag Football says this: the more the season goes on, the less the loss to Weber looks as understandable. Crushes other GSAC teams. Wish they would play Nevada State. Agreed. Gino says Hope International finds themselves in the top 8, his top 8, not ours, after all the team that lost this, after all after all of the teams that lost here in Week 7. Geez, amazing for a first-year program. Agreed. Cody says did not play, but if they win out at this OUAZ Jamboree, this would almost certainly spell conference champ and nationals invite. I mean, as of right now, they are, the leader in the conference by far here. Look, the auto bid is that they got to win the GSAC. I think they're the favorite to win that. I don't know if there is really any team that has played him that close to worry about that. But if you're you got to get the job done first, right? Get through this next couple weeks here, make the tournament, punch your ticket in here in year one, and then that experience of the postseason will be invaluable. And really, if you think about it, the teams that they played earlier on in the season on that tour in Florida, that's going to help them, for sure. That win over St. Thomas, that's going to help them. But speaking of St. Thomas, they are right ahead of them. So that's interesting here. They do move down a couple of spots, though. Women's College Flag Football says Kaiser does this to a lot of good teams. So there's that. I will say, though, Kaiser did not do that to Weber, which makes the Sun Conference interesting. Gino says, it's always interesting, but I'm just saying that. Gino says they got simply crushed offensively versus Warner and Kaiser. Those are the two top teams in the nation, though, so I am keeping St. Thomas in the top 10. Cody says brutal week for the Bobcats, who need a big bounce back this coming week before the conference tournament here. And yeah, if you want to argue rankings-wise, I don't know if they really need a big bounce back here. I think regardless, they probably should win. I'd probably be more surprised if they lost here this last week than anything. They should beat FMU. But then you have Weber. That's probably the one that could really go either way, and that'll be a good game right there. Oh my gosh, there are a bunch of good games on Saturday, actually. And I hate that that's one that we may not be able to put our full undivided attention to, but hopefully that is one that is available for replay, because I definitely want to watch that one all the way through. But that should be a really good one there. St. Thomas and Weber, both teams with a wide range of wins, I feel like, against a lot of teams here. So we'll see what happens there. Now at 8 is Baker, who drops 2 spots here. And I think for good reason, and arguably, it could be argued that they could have dropped more, but this is what Women's College Flag Football says. Not saying get blanked by Midland not saying getting blanked by Midland on the road was necessarily bad, but was definitely the shock of the week. Agreed. This is what Gino had to say. What on earth happened versus Midland? Baker now puts themselves in a position to have a very tough matchup in the first round, or just miss the national tournament entirely. We'll see. The NAIA tournament entirely. The Invitational, just being clear there. Cody says would not and could not believe the 12-0 upset, but regardless of what I believe, it did happen and jeopardizes a postseason appearance here. Not in the KCAC, but, in the Invitational. And, yeah, I don't know. It looked like a really bad offensive performance, and Midland played a great game. That's just what happened, and Baker just did not at all. There are a lot of turnovers, just inefficient, and on top of that, their defense allowed Midland to score, who's been very up and down. Now, granted, Midland has a very young core there, and I think they have a good thing going with Lotta Wolf and Holiness Hodges for sure, plus all the veterans that are already there and are going to do their thing. And I think that is kind of a big deal that you can't overlook either, with Midland having that many veterans. But if you're Baker, it's not like you have first-year players or second-year players, so just a little inexcusable, I'm not going to lie. But I'd be lying if I didn't believe in Willie Perez and what he has going on over there. It is always a little biased towards what he has going on over there. I think he's going to get them going, and he's going to use this as a wake-up call. This is your classic wake-up call loss. Classic away, on the road, a trap game against a, veteran team. It's your classic, trap game loss that you look at. you feel and know that you can do better than, and then you turn it around and you play your best football from here on out. And so that could definitely happen for Baker, and this is probably the best time for it to happen, because obviously if it happened in the postseason, you're done, and there's no second chances there. So with that being said, they play Cotty, or sorry, that's last week. That was canceled. They play Graceland coming up here, and then they have their KCAC tournament at the end of the month. They should beat Graceland. That doesn't mean overlook him, because obviously it looks like they overlooked Midland maybe a little bit already. But, you go on, you beat Graceland here, who you can't overlook, and then you run it at the KCAC tournament. And honestly, the KCAC, like I said, I'm trying to keep all my postseason thoughts for later, but the KCAC feels wide open right now. So if you're going to take an opportunity, take it now. So there you go. Now at 7, you have Nevada State here. They move up a couple of spots with the losses. This is what Cody said. This team might just finish the season undefeated. One has to wonder if they'll receive an invite or go to nationals. And I agree. We are doing our research. Gino says, can't wait to see what stats they put up this year. Stat boy over there. And then Women's College Flag Football says, does anybody really know what to do with this team? Because it seems no one wants to play them. Challenged once all season by ACU. I will say this, they are on the West Coast, so that definitely puts them at a disadvantage as far as playing other teams that are ranked here. If anything, Nevada State has to travel. But, they're a first-year program. I think this is pretty typical. Next year you could probably see a very different schedule here. I will say, I wish Hope scheduled them, and that was a game that was actually shown somewhere as well. I think that would have been a very interesting game here. And if they get invited to the postseason, I'd be interested to see how that goes for sure, and would love to watch some games. Now, at 6 is Kansas Wesleyan, who moves up a couple of spots here. Let's start with Cody. He says the win over Ottawa and subsequent stumbling of other KCAC squads has KWU in a prime position to punch a ticket to nationals. Gino says Baker falling to Midland means Kansas Wesleyan is firmly at the top of the KCAC with Ottawa. Agreed there. They do have the tiebreaker, though, so there's that. And then Women's College Flag Football said the other team that beat Ottawa been on fire since only lost to Baker, and I gotta agree there. Now, Kansas Wesleyan is peaking at the right time here, and you gotta give them a lot of credit for that. Now, at 5 is Ottawa here. Women's College Flag Football says this team has the best win in the country as of today. Gino says time for revenge against Kansas Wesleyan on Saturday. That's another must-see game. And then Cody says Ottawa really responded and now has big games still ahead. And the KCAC representative is really in a weird spot in their race. And yeah, I mean, I don't think it's guaranteed that they're the KCAC representative. I think right now it is in jeopardy. But you could right the ship this weekend. And so that's a huge game here. I'm excited for that one. Excited for that Kansas Wesleyan game. That's a huge one coming up. So we'll see what happens. But, excited for this week is all I'm saying. Now at 4 is Milligan, who did not play this week. A rare break in their schedule. I feel like they've been playing like a million games every week for a couple weeks straight. So I'm sure this is great rest for them. Women's College Flag Football says this, underrated. They will play anyone and beat everyone. Florida Shade only reaches so far. Oh, okay. So there we go there. Florida Shade only reaches so far. Now, Milligan, like I said, taking a good break here. We'll talk a little bit more about postseason and their hopes later on in the next segment, but I think they're in a good spot right now. Now, at 3 is Kaiser. They moved down a spot here. And let's talk about it. Cody says this, they survived a bit of a Weber scare, but now have all week to prepare for Warner, which could be a Sun Conference title preview, and maybe even a national championship preview. Gino says Warner versus Kaiser Saturday, enough said. That is the other big game going down, Warner versus Kaiser and Ottawa versus Kansas Wesleyan. Hey, I'm just being honest. If this was an actual national televised thing, shoot, man, Playmaker's Corner, we'd do College Game Day at one of these spots, if not both, and we'd run it. Ideally, we'd do, the Florida game earlier and then fly back and watch K-Dub versus Ottawa for a primetime game, or we could reverse it. I honestly don't care, but we got some great college football this week, and I'm so excited. Anyways, back to the rankings. Women's college flag football says gave up a 16-point lead over Ottawa, or would be number one on the list. Yeah, agreed. But, I'm just putting this out there. Hey, if they're going to take their shot here, it starts right now. I think they have a really good shot at claiming the one spot here. I mean, at least personally, I've ranked Kaiser at 1 before. I would do it again, potentially, if they beat Warner. So we'll see. Actually, I guess there's Florida Gateway, too. I will say that. But, I'm just saying. I definitely consider it, but they got to do it first. That's going to be a great game and a preview probably of what the Sun Conference tournament will look like. All right, moving on, we got Florida Gateway, who moves up a spot here with their win over Daytona State. Let's start with women's college flag football. It was a game. Both sides say so. I assume talking about the life one. Ottawa was gassed after the comeback over Kaiser. Deal with it. Gino says no one is going to touch the Timberwolves for the rest of the season, the regular season as of right now. Postseason will get really interesting, though. Cody says Daytona State's performance might show the closing of a gap in the NJCAA, which we will only continue to find out and investigate. But for now, they stay atop here with another win. And I agree. I mean, we've been known that they're at the top of the JUCO teams. But this postseason is where it gets fun, right? I mean, I'm not writing off Daytona State at all. They still got to beat them, so that's going to happen. But the postseason does get fun here. There's no way that they will be left out of the women's college flag finals. There's 20 teams in a single elimination bracket here. There should be 6 JUCO reps here. I know at the time I'm recording this, it is April 7th, so there should be a Zoom meeting or some sort of meeting later today about that, but you cannot have that tournament without Florida Gateway. Now, I will say, I heard they might be doing their own, not them doing their own thing, but all the JUCOs might be doing their own thing, but I personally, as a fan, would really love to see them play some of these other teams, because I think in a national tournament type of setting there, I mean, you don't have the top NAIA teams there because they'll be doing the Invitational, but I think Florida Gateway could really put on a show. And that'd be some great football to watch right there. Either way, Florida Gateway, another amazing season. Nothing crazy. Shout out Coach Hufty over there. Shout out all the great players over there. I'm sure they're going to be looking at a million offers. If you are one of these new D1s, you should have been at Florida Gateway yesterday, being honest with you. So there you go. Now, at number 1 still is Warner. This is what everyone says. Women's college flag football says train keeps rolling. Got a game at least this week. Got a big game this week against Kaiser. That'll decide who hosts the Sun Conference tournament, I'm pretty sure. And I think that's their only game. I feel like it's been a while since they've only played one game in a week. So a big build up there for sure. Gino says Warner versus Kaiser Saturday. Enough said. And then Cody says... Gino put the same thing for Warner and Kaiser. That's all right. Cody said, impressive win over St. Thomas, but the fireworks really hype up this week against Weber and Kaiser here. Sorry, so Warner actually does. I'm getting my schedules mixed up. Yeah, so they do play Weber actually. I don't know why. I thought they played them last week. No, it's because they played Florida Memorial last week. They play Weber today. Yeah, today when I am recording this. I'm recording this in the morning. It is currently 8:10 a.m. Mountain Time. So we'll be watching that here in a couple hours. That'll be exciting. And then they get Kaiser on Saturday, assuming they don't get upset by Weber. And maybe this just doesn't age really well when we post this on Thursday. Assuming they don't get upset by Weber, that Kaiser game is going to be massive. I think regardless, it's going to be massive for sure here, but definitely looking forward to that. This Warner team, oh my gosh. I can't rave about them enough here. We'll talk about the postseason and them more here in a little bit, but they are a very complete team. They have an MVP candidate, multiple technically, but an MVP candidate on their team. I think it is really, really hard to justify not voting for one of their players to be MVP. That is a later problem, though. We'll talk about more end of the year award stuff later. But I'm just putting that out there. From a personal perspective, as a voter, it'll be really, really hard. And I think that's rightfully so. So there you go there. That is your rankings. Once again, just outside Marymount, Gallaudet, Midland, Immaculata, Campbellsville, and Ventura. Also, Villa Maria is there as well. Tied at 23 is Thomas, Saddleback, and Daytona State. 22 Roberts Wesleyan, 21 Eastern, 20 Huntington, 19 Lease McRae, 18 Weber, 17 Aurora. Tied at 15 is Life and Barton College, 14 Lindsey Wilson, 13 Wingate, 12 St. Francis, 11 Ferrum, 10 Hope International, 9 St. Thomas, 8 Baker, 7 Nevada State, 6 Kansas Wesleyan, 5 Ottawa, 4 Milligan, 3 Kaiser, 2 Florida Gateway, and at number 1 for now is Warder. All right, now let's go ahead and talk about the postseason. Let's talk about the NAIA Invitational first and foremost. In case you don't know what that is, so the NAIA has declared women's college flag football to be an emerging sport here. So that does bring up an invitational. That will take place, and this is what we know right now, but that'll take place at IMG Academy. I want to say either first or second week of May, and we will be there. Myself, Cody, and Gino, we will be there. I specifically will be there just on that Saturday. In case you don't know, I am a teacher, and my school's field day is on Friday, and I want to be there. So I will be going from my field day straight to Florida after that from Colorado. But Cody and Gino will be there the whole week, and then I'll be there for the semifinals and the national championship. But basically how it'll work is that there will be 8 teams invited to this NAIA Invitational, the first ever. And this is what we know. 4 of the 8 teams will be automatic qualifiers. That means that they can earn a automatic bid qualifier by winning their conference or their group here. And we'll talk about that in a minute. And then there will be 4 other spots that will be at-large selections determined by the NAIA Women's Flag Football National Selection Committee. I will say this right now. We are not part of the committee. I have no idea who is. I'm going to assume that they know what they're doing, but this will be the first of its kind, so it can be pretty unpredictable. I'm not going to lie there. But we're going to talk about it. So let's start with the 4 automatic qualifiers, okay? You'll get 1 from the Great Southwest Athletic Conference, the GSAC, 1 from the KCAC, the Kansas Collegiate Athletic Conference, 1 from the Sun Conference, and then this one is interesting, 1 team from the group of the Appalachian Athletic Conference, Crossroads League, Mid-South Conference, and Wolverine Hoosiers Athletic Conference. So with that group, think about Milligan, Campbellsville, Lindsey Wilson, St. Francis, Siena Heights, that kind of group over there will be basically battling for an automatic qualifier. Now, I don't know if they're going to play each other in a tournament for that. We have reached out to a number of programs, and like I said, it is April 8th, 2026, 4:25 p.m. Mountain Time when I'm recording this. We are finding out information as much as we can. I know there was a Zoom meeting, I think yesterday, about it, so I'm not using any of that information just yet. But, we are using the information we have. As of right now, I could not find that if that group is going to play for that automatic bid spot. Right now, it just looks like everyone's going to play, a game or 2 here at the end, and then that will be that. If I had to pick, though, a group from that general area, thinking about Kentucky, Tennessee, you have Siena Heights as well. I think Graceland technically too. Actually, Graceland might be KCAC. I could be wrong there. But, just thinking about that group, most likely the automatic bid from that group will be Milligan. Currently in our rankings, which, we just did here. Let me go ahead and pull it up here. Currently, Milligan in our rankings has been in the top 5 forever. And that's not just NAIA programs, that's all programs around the country. JUCO, NCAA, all that great stuff. This last week, we ranked them at 4th currently. They should probably get that bid to make it in over a Cumberland or a St. Francis, Campbellsville. Who am I missing? Lindsey Wilson is probably in that conversation. I would imagine that Milligan at 16-0 should make it. They play LaGrange, Huntington, Emmanuel, and Campbellsville here in a little bit. And I just saw this. It says that there will be an independent tournament scheduled for the 25th of Saturday. Interesting. There is something there. All right, so that wasn't there before, I swear. But so they will battle it out. If I had to choose, though, and just project, it'd probably be Milligan. That has been the strongest squad so far. I will say, St. Francis, you got to look out for them. They came up with some big wins. Lindsey Wilson, obviously, with Amaya Pablo, you can't discount them. Campbellsville, they got a lot of veterans over there, probably just right next to Milligan. Cumberland is peaking at the right time, so you got to look out for all those teams. But if I had to predict today who will come out of that group, it'll probably be Milligan. So there you go. That is one of the 4 qualifiers, automatic bids right there. Now, let's look at the 3 other ones. Let's start in the West here. Let's start with the GSAC, Great Southwest Athletic Conference here. Let me go ahead and pull up those standings. In case you don't know, this is the newest NAIA flag football conference made up of teams from California and Arizona pretty much. Here you have Hope International, La Sierra, Arizona Christian, Simpson, Benedictine Mesa, and Ottawa, Arizona OUAZ here. If I had to pick right now, and I think the regular season's not over, it will probably be Hope that will come out of this conference right here. Now, they still got to play in their conference. Nothing is over at all. But they only have 2 losses on the season, and both of them were to teams in the Sun Conference. You have Warner and you have Weber. And then they also beat a team in the Sun Conference in St. Thomas. So you have that as well, which is definitely interesting. Right now, they're playing in that OUAZ Jamboree. I'm going to try not to spoil it, but currently they are undefeated as far as we know. So I'm pretty sure at this point they have beat everyone in their conference. They've also played for some, I'm just putting this out there, they've also played the toughest schedule out of anybody else here in this conference. So even if they don't win their conference, which I would be incredibly surprised because it's not like, their conference games have been super close, I would say as far as an at-large bid, like I said, I don't know anything about this committee, but I could see the thought process of them seeing hey, maybe we add in another Western team here, like Hope, who showed that they could play with the Sun Conference and beat a team like St. Thomas, who is also on the edge. But if I had to predict right now, it will probably be Hope. So there you go. Your 2 qualifiers, in my opinion, as of right now, would probably be Milligan and Hope right there. And so then that leaves us the KCAC and the Sun Conference. Let's talk about the easier one, the Sun Conference, right? We have a big matchup this Saturday here. Warner will play Kaiser. And I know in the last segment here I said, barring Warner potentially getting upset by Weber, they will be playing Kaiser for a big one. They didn't get upset by Weber, spoiler alert. And so still looking like a battle here coming up this upcoming Saturday, which myself, Cody, and Gino will be watching together. Let's talk about the top of this conference, Warner and Kaiser. I think we will have a preview of the Sun Conference Championship this Saturday. That'll decide, who gets to host the Sun Conference tournament, I believe, because the winner would have the tiebreaker right there. And that could be massive. You never know. It's not like the farthest drive, but every advantage does matter. Okay. And so right now, both teams are 8-0 in the Sun Conference. Warner is 17-0 overall. Kaiser is 12-1. Warner has had so many dominant wins. Currently in our rankings, they are number 1. Kaiser, I believe, is top 5 in our rankings. They're number 3, which is not bad at all. I'm just going to be honest with you, right? I really feel like the winner of the Sun Conference will be one of these 2 teams. Both of these teams have been super dominant, and I think if any other team was to win it, it would be a massive upset, maybe the biggest upset we have seen in Sun Conference history, if I'm being just completely honest with you. So these two are the favorites for sure. Regardless of who ends up winning the Sun Conference in the tournament and getting that automatic bid, I believe that both of these teams are pretty much locks for the Sun Conference, for the Sun Conference tournament, but locks for the NAIA Invitational. So there you go. That's one more qualifier for the Sun Conference, and then I would just go ahead and say the loser ends up being one of the at-larges. So that leaves only 3 at-larges, and then one team. I guess one more automatic qualifier here. And so let's talk about that one, because this is where it gets interesting. That is the KCAC here. And you have, right now, is this updated? Yeah. Right now, it has Ottawa number 1 in the conference. Currently, hold up. That can't be right. Oh, wow. Maybe it is right. So currently, right now, Ottawa's at number 1 in the conference. They have one loss, but it says they are 9-0 in conference, which is interesting because that one loss was to Kansas Wesleyan. I guess they do play Kansas Wesleyan twice here, so I guess that game that they first played against Kansas Wesleyan was not technically considered a conference game. So that really, oh my gosh. Okay, so that really makes this Saturday, the 11th, a massive game here. Kansas Wesleyan, if they want to take control of the KCAC, and get an advantage in this tournament, would have to beat Ottawa this week. So that's where things get interesting. But really, it is a 3-team race right here. Ottawa's at number 1. They're 11-1, 9-0 in conference. Right behind them is Baker, who is number 2. 6-1 in conference, 10-1. Oh my god. Now that I'm looking at this, I don't think it's updated because it says Baker is 6-1 in conference, 10-1 overall. That is not true. Currently, they are 10-2 because they just lost to Midland. Their other loss was a 12-6 loss to Ottawa. So I'm gonna, I guess I still have to use it. The KCAC, what are you doing? How come it's not updated? Anyways, really, it doesn't change the fact that this is a 3-team race right here. Ottawa, Baker, and Kansas Wesleyan has all lost a game to each other, someone in that group, right? Ottawa, I think really what it comes down to is Ottawa and Kansas Wesleyan. If Ottawa wins, they avenge that loss to K-Dub. And like I said, currently right now, it's not listed as a conference loss here, and they go ahead and they become the regular season conference champions. That gives them the 1 seed in the KCAC tournament. If K-Dub wins, I think that probably puts them over Ottawa, and I would imagine Baker. I would imagine even though I think Baker beat K-Dub. On top of that, they lost only 12-6 to Ottawa, which is not bad, but they also lost to Midland, and I don't know if that is something that you could just completely forget here. So there could be a chance that there is like a 3-way tie as well. I don't know how that would work. We would have to see here, because K-Dub would play Graceland and William Woods here, assuming that they would win those games, and if they don't, then it's going to be somebody else there. Either way, it's going to be one of Baker, Kansas Wesleyan, or Ottawa, and that is really where things get interesting, because I think you definitely want to get picky about who you play first in the KCAC tournament here. You probably don't want to play, like if you're Kansas Wesleyan, you probably don't want to play an Ottawa in the semis or a Baker in the semis and then play one of those two in the championship. Vice versa for everyone there, right? I think ideally you don't have to play one of an Ottawa, Baker, or K-Dub in the semis, and you just face one of those teams in the championship, and that'll probably give you your best chance at winning. Now, that makes it really interesting because I think really these 3 teams are a lot closer to each other than, people might want to admit. Baker just lost to Midland, so that shows, and they were fully healthy. At least it looks like it. It didn't look like anyone was out. So that shows you, unfortunately, what they could be capable of in a worst case scenario. But to be fair, Baker also blew out Kansas Wesleyan, and that probably shows you what K-Dub could be capable of as well. But then at the same time, Kansas Wesleyan beat Ottawa by, granted, it was like 1 point, but they still beat him by 1 point. So what does that say about Ottawa? So at the end of the day, just being completely honest, I think it is really anybody's game. Just my opinion, looking at this, it's really hard to not look at Ottawa. Look at the Sauer sisters, who are for sure in their final year with Ottawa, wanting to go out with a bang. And just looking at the history that they have brought there, the history of success, and just being like, Ottawa's going to figure it out and they're going to win it all. And that's your automatic bid. But, I'm just saying, there's a but. I feel like this is the most competitive the KCAC has been for the top spot in a while. And to make things even spicier is that there's an automatic bid to the NAIA Invitational on the line. And so let's just run the scenarios real quick, right? If Ottawa wins it all, they get the automatic bid. Where does that put Baker and Kansas Wesleyan? Because you got to remember, Baker and Kansas Wesleyan, they did not play any Sun Conference teams. And I would probably, like I said, it's really hard to predict what the selection committee is going to do. But if they are any experts at all on flag football or have been following it, they look at these Sun Conference teams outside of Warner and Kaiser, and you got to take them seriously to a degree here. You have St. Thomas at 7-3, right? According to the Sun Conference website, by the way, St. Thomas at 7-3, Life at 7-3, Weber at 10-5, even Thomas as well at 8-6. I think you could probably make a decent argument for all of those teams. First off, because they play each other, and those are great games. Realistically, the Sun Conference has beat up on a lot of other non-Sun Conference teams. They've made the NAI ranks look really good. So it's really hard to just be like, let's just throw in Baker and Kansas Wesleyan if, Ottawa's the auto bid. You just can't, right? Just looking at St. Thomas right here, they lost an OT, like a quadruple or whatever it was, OT game to Hope early in the season, 35-36. Then they go ahead and beat Live 7-6, FMU 32-0, Campbellsville 27-7, Siena Heights 14-6, St. Francis 32-20, and they just keep on rolling. And then they lose tough ones to Warner and Kaiser, right? And then they're going to play FMU and Weber. That's a decent schedule right there. That's a decent schedule. And so you're going to have to look at it if you're the committee and be like, okay, well, if Ottawa makes it, right, just theoretically, does Baker and Kansas Wesleyan have a strong enough schedule to justify putting them into the Invitational? Because mind you, if Ottawa's in, that's already 4 automatic bids, right? You got Hope, most likely, Milligan, most likely, either Kaiser or Warner, but whoever loses that one is probably going to make it in and take an at-large seat, and then you have, like I was predicting, Ottawa as well, and so already, that's 5 teams. There's only 3 spots left. Are you going to give Baker and Kansas Wesleyan 2 of those 3 spots? That's where it could get interesting, right? Because then that means, okay, so say we give them 2 of those 3 spots. St. Thomas, just looking at the Sun Conference rankings right now, would probably be the next team in, and then you are leaving out Life, Weber, Thomas, right? Or are you going to be like, okay, let's take the runner-up, right? Whether it's Baker, Kansas Wesleyan, and then leave the other one out, and then you take a St. Thomas, Life, Weber, or some sort of combination, right? That's the conversations that are going to be had here in the coming weeks, if not already, for that selection committee. Now, and that's the easy scenario. Now, here's the hard scenario. Say for some reason Ottawa does not win the KCAC championship. Mind you, it would be for the first time ever that they don't win the KCAC, but let's just dive into the scenarios, right? Because that's the fun part of all of this. Say, they get through it. They beat K-Dub in the regular season or whatever, or they split it, but it doesn't matter. They go on and they lose. They don't win the KCAC. There's not an automatic bid. It comes down to Kansas Wesleyan or Baker battling it out, and one of those teams gets the automatic bid. And Ottawa, let's start with, like I said, that scenario. They just don't make the KCAC championship at all. is the selection committee really going to leave out, what is it, the 5-time national championships? I mean, they're the only one who has won the national championship here on the NAIA level. I would have a really hard time, no matter how many losses they have, seeing them leave out Ottawa. And so that makes it interesting right there. Now you have 2 from the KCAC making it in, 2 from the Sun Conference making it in, and then that leaves only 2 spots there. And so then now it gets into strength of schedule. If you're going to put in 2 KCA teams and 2 Sun Conference teams, you most likely take the 3rd team in the conference from there. And so that would probably mean, you probably take the runner-up, because if Ottawa doesn't make it, you take the runner-up right there. And so that's probably a scenario where Baker, Ottawa, Kansas Wesleyan most likely all make it in. The Sun Conference, I think if you want to be fair, probably bring in the team that finishes 3rd in that tournament, whether it's St. Thomas, Life, or Weber. And so that makes that tournament super important there. And then that's it, right? But that does leave out, the at-large group. I don't know if there are any other teams in the GSAC that will have a strong enough schedule. In my opinion, if I was on the committee, that's what I would be thinking. I would probably rather have another Sun or KCAC team in there than a second GSAC team, if I'm just being completely honest. And that gets really interesting, right? It gets super interesting come postseason play in those conference tournaments. Now, on the other hand, if Ottawa does make the conference championship and they lose, I think it's guaranteed that they take the top 2 in that conference championship. It gets really hard, just saying, it just gets really hard seeing them take the 3rd team in the KCAC. I think it's more likely that 3 teams from the KCAC make it if Ottawa doesn't make the conference championship at all. And then it's Baker and Kansas Wesleyan. And then you have Ottawa, who they're just not going to leave out no matter what, I believe. And so then it's like, okay, well, that's 3 teams there. And then it gets interesting in the Sun Conference. So, that conversation could go on and on here. Let's look at some of the other teams as well. But I think really what it's going to come down to is the KCAC. I think what happens in that tournament is going to affect the fates of a lot of other teams who are vying to make it into the Invitational. So real quick, let's look at the Sun Conference right here. Teams outside of Warner and Kaiser. You have St. Thomas, you have Life, you have Weber, and then I'd probably throw in Thomas as of right now. Those are all the teams with a positive or at least a 500 conference record here, and they all have winning records at that. Thomas 8-6, Weber 10-5, Life 7-3, St. Thomas 7-3 here, which is where things get interesting for sure. So St. Thomas, let's look at what they have left. They got Florida Memorial and Weber. If they lose to either of those teams, and I don't think they will lose to FMU, but say they lose to either of those teams, their path to the Invitational definitely gets a lot harder, and that's even before the conference tournament. Now, luckily, you still have the conference tournament to maybe redeem some of those, but I think your path is a lot clearer if you sweep here, and then you have a good showing at the conference tournament. Now, if you don't sweep here, like I said, it gets interesting, or if you don't have a good showing at the conference tournament regardless, then I think that gives you maybe more of a reason to root against you. But I'm just saying, St. Thomas, they went into whatever OT with hope. I kind of feel like St. Thomas is going to make it in, assuming they win the games that they're supposed to. We'll see. Then you have Life on the other hand here. They play Reinhardt and Alabama State. I don't really anticipate them losing to either. Losses do include a 20-32 loss to Warner, which is not bad at all. They went ahead and they beat Campbellsville, Point. They beat Campbellsville, so there's that as well, which is huge. But, I don't know if that is... I'm pretty sure they have another loss here. Let me go ahead and pull this up right here. Yes, they do. They have a couple, actually. They lost to St. Francis. They lost to Campbellsville. That's tough. You did beat Lindsey Wilson, so that is good here. If they make it into the Sun Conference tournament, they have to have a good tournament. That's it. You have to have a good tournament. Obviously, you can't afford to lose here in the regular season. I think any loss to any of these teams will probably kick you out of consideration. But if you're alive, you have to win at least one game in tournament. So that's what's at stake right there. Now let's go ahead and look at Weber. Weber's kind of an interesting team right here for sure. Because really, Weber, they have a lot of potential. They've played some really good teams pretty close here. And then they've lost to teams who they probably shouldn't lose to, but it is what it is. All right, looking at Weber, they're 10-5 as of right now. Looking at the games they have left, they play St. Thomas. That is their last game here on Saturday, and I think that'll be a big one. If you are Weber, just looking at their schedule right now, you are in a sore need of a vital resume-making win, right? Beating Hope by a lot is good. I think that definitely helps them out. Beating Thomas in overtime definitely helps them out, despite them losing to Thomas 6-45. Actually, I don't know. I think beating Thomas was good until you lost to Thomas 6-45 with everyone, and that kind of cancels out that accomplishment. I'm not gonna lie. Throw in that 12-13 loss to Life, another close loss to St. Francis, 12-21. Things do get a little bit dicey. So if I'm looking at Weber right now, to be fair, they played Kaiser close 12-20, but obviously a win would be a lot more valuable than a loss. And so just looking at their regular season resume, a St. Thomas win would really boost them. I'm just going to be honest with you. Not only would it take out a team in front of them, but it would put them in place to be maybe one of the first at-large teams to be selected for the Invitational, because they would have that head-to-head, unless they lose to St. Thomas somehow in the Sun Conference tournament, and then things get really interesting right there, right? But I think a St. Thomas win, even if it's regular season, is just absolutely vital. It's at home, too. I'm just saying, it's at home, too. So this is a big opportunity for them this Saturday to make something happen, potentially. And so we'll see what happens. And then, obviously, if they could have a good showing at the Sun Conference tournament, that is only going to help them even more here. But I just will say this, if they lose to St. Thomas and then have a good showing, I would still consider things a little iffy, especially if St. Thomas is able to avenge a potential regular season loss. So we'll see about Weber for sure here. We'll definitely see about them. And then we got Thomas. I think it's really a long shot for them to make it here. The 45-6 win over Weber is big time. Love that. Even though they lost in OT to them, right? I don't think they're completely healthy in that one. I'm just saying 45-6 in a game that happened sooner, that definitely matters. You also throw in that they beat a team like Lise McRae 40-0. I don't know if they're going to be, keeping that in mind, but that's massive. The St. Francis loss is tough, though, Really, the path for Thomas, they have to go undefeated, and they probably have to win 2 Sun Conference, postseason games. You got to win 2 games in the tournament, at least, to really get considered here for that Invitational. And so it's a little bit of a long shot, not over, but you gotta win more against quality teams for sure here. And so it's going to be interesting. I think you got to keep an eye on the KCA, see what's going on there, right? I laid out the scenarios. You got Kansas Wesleyan, Baker, and Ottawa. There's definitely a scenario where one of those 3 teams is left out, but it's just as likely that, those 3 could all make it in. Now, if that happens, then you look at the Sun Conference probably next year. Warner and Kaiser, I think, no matter what, are going to make it in. And then you have St. Thomas Life, Weber, and Thomas, who are all battling at an at-large spot, which, there's just going to be less, right? Because you already have the runner-up of the Sun Conference, probably the runner-up of the KCAC making it. That leaves 2 spots in the end for a whole bunch of teams. And that is not even including all the other teams that are in consideration here. You got St. Francis, who, you absolutely got to look at. You have Lindsey Wilson, who's another team you got to look at. You have Cumberland, who is probably closer to a long shot like Thomas, but like you probably got to look at them again. Just being completely honest with you, those are the teams that come to mind first here. Let's look at not Siena Heights. Let's look at St. Francis first here. Right now they're 8-4 in their first season. Their 4 losses go: a 6-point loss to Siena Heights, a 35-12 loss to Kaiser, 32-20 to St. Thomas, 48-6 to Warner. The Siena Heights loss is pretty bad, but you could probably argue that, hey, it was early season, it was their first game ever. It also still went into double overtime for an experienced team to beat them, and so that probably doesn't look as bad. 32-12 to Kaiser, I mean, it's like the number 1 or 2 team in the country. That's not bad at all. You know, it could have been worse for sure. Losing 32-20 to St. Thomas, that probably felt like more of a winnable game, so it feels like more of a missed opportunity than anything, but that's really only a 12-point loss to a team that's on the edge right with you there. And speaking of right on the edge right with you, there's Weber, who's 21. I mean, they beat 21-12, and so if for any reason Weber beat St. Thomas, I mean, if anything, if I'm St. Francis, I'm probably rooting for Weber to beat St. Thomas because that makes you look better, you know, beating a team that beat the team that beat you. Just, oh my gosh, so many scenarios right here. But there's that, and then you lose to Warner 48-6. That's fine, most teams did, right? And then you go on a win streak: 39-28 over Graceland, 49-12 over Midland, 32-26 over Campbellsville, 27-18 over Life, another team who's on the edge here trying to make it in, 21-14 over Cumberland, another team on the edge here. They play Wittenberg later, not this week but next, but I'm going to assume they're going to win that game and not lose, because if they lose, that's probably it, if I'm being completely honest with you right there. But I mean, if you're St. Francis, this resume looks pretty good. You know, I would probably be inclined to give them one of the at-large bids, because, I mean, just saying, just assuming that each runner-up in the KCAC and the Sun get one each, you know, that leaves only 2 spots. I think St. Francis is in a pretty good spot to claim one of those bids, just looking at strength of schedule. I mean, you got Thomas, Kaiser, St. Thomas, Weber, Warner, Life as well. You know, if they played in the Sun Conference, they would be right in that mix, too. Just being completely honest with you. So that's definitely a team that I think is in a really good spot. I think Weber winning, because that's one of your Sun Conference wins, or what I should say this: Weber, Life, and Thomas winning only makes St. Francis look better. At least in my opinion, it does, right? If they're able to beat those 3 teams. So the farther they go in the Sun Conference, I think the better chance St. Francis has of making it. So there you go. That's probably another at-large spot, if I'm being honest. Then you have Lindsey Wilson. They are 10-2 right now. You know, they lost to Ferrum, D2 19-39, which is tough. They lose to Life, though. This was their opportunity. They lose to Life 12-40. And that's tough, right? And so for Lindsey Wilson, they only have 2 losses here, but I mean, they don't really have a signature win over a big-time NAIA team. It's a lot of D2s here. I mean, they beat Campbellsville, which is good. Same with Cumberland, so they're at least in front of them. Same with Siena Heights here. But that loss to Life is definitely tough. So there you go. I guess they beat Campbellsville twice, actually, so that does help them out. Now, coming up, though, they have Cumberland again, who they can't underestimate. That is a game that Cumberland needs to win, as well as Lindsey Wilson. So there's that. You have Emmanuel. That won't be an easy game either, but you know, if you're Lindsey Wilson, that looked good on the resume. But I think first and foremost, next week here, that game against Milligan is going to be absolutely massive here. That a win over Milligan would boost their chances so much. And that's before the group of 6 tournament here that happens at the end of the month. Because obviously, if they play well in that, them, St. Francis, Campbellsville, all those teams, right? If they play well in that, then that probably locks up another at-large spot. Like I said, I was looking at St. Francis, and I was like, as of right now, you know, their resume looks pretty good going into the tournament, assuming they win a game or 2, or the runner-ups, they could probably make that one as well, you know. And so really, when you look at it, I mean, you're looking at St. Francis, you're looking at Milligan, right? those two teams, assuming they make it to, the championship of that group of 8 tournament, will probably get a auto bid and then an at-large spot is what it probably looks like. Or say Milligan, does not win it all. Milligan, I think for sure makes it into this invitational. I'd be surprised if Milligan doesn't make it in. They would have to collapse here in this last part of the season, and lose to like everyone for them to really not make it in. And then that makes it interesting because then it's like, all right, Lindsey Wilson, St. Francis, Campbellsville, all these other teams, they could potentially be in play, or they just add in more Sun Conference and KCAC teams. Either way, it's going to get interesting. I would probably bet that they add the runner-up in as an at-large bid for this big group tournament here. Just saying. So there you go. But Lindsey Wilson, they got to put in some work though. They gotta win some games. They need a signature win over an NAIA team. Campbellsville, that's a good win. The 12-40 loss to Life does not look good. And so if you're Lindsey Wilson, if you get matched up with, not even that. Actually, let me even backtrack. And if you're Lindsey Wilson, you need to make it to the championship of this group of 8 tournament to have a chance here at making the NAIA Invitational. That's probably it. Assuming you don't beat Milligan in the regular season, you got to, right? And if you do beat Milligan, then I think no matter what, you're probably fine as long as Milligan wins the whole thing. And so it gets more interesting for them. There's definitely more hoops they have to jump through. And then you got like St. Francis right here, who pretty much just has to, they got to beat Wittenberg, right? They got to have a decent showing in that tournament, which I believe they should be a part of here. And then they should probably make it in. Even if they don't win the whole tournament, that group of 6 tournament, if they do a good enough job here and win one game, I'm looking at this resume, it's going to be really hard to justify putting in a Weber, a Thomas, a Life over St. Francis. Or at least it gets very interesting there. So there you go. Another team, or I guess these last 2 teams I want to talk about, I really feel like, well, hold on, let me pause right there. Sorry, one team. Cumberland is 8-11. I don't think they're going to make it. They lost to Life, they lost to Siena Heights, they lost to St. Francis. Unfortunately, it's probably not their year unless they upset Lindsey Wilson, and then they have to have a great showing at the group of 6, as in they have to make the championship probably at least to seriously get considered for an at-large spot here. So there is that. Campbellsville is here. They're 9-9, which is not bad. Losses to St. Francis is tough, but they beat Life. A loss to Lindsey Wilson is tough as well, but like I said, they beat Life. They beat Midland. Lost only by 8 to Weber. Lost by a bunch, though, to Warner and Kaiser here, as well as St. Thomas. And I don't think, they play Milligan one more time here. I'm not saying they're out of it, but what has to happen is that they absolutely have to beat Milligan next week. Have to. And then on top of that, they probably have to win the tournament as well to, obviously, if they win the tournament, then they get an automatic qualifier. But even just making it to the championship of that group of 6 tournament is going to help them out a lot. But they got to win some games. So they're in a similar spot as a Lindsey Wilson, I would say. Not as good, though, for sure. But definitely similar. So there you go. It could be a number of combinations here. I think just going into this week, right? Biggest games and conferences to watch. You have to watch the Sun Conference. You have to watch the KCAC. In the KCAC, you got Kansas Wesleyan facing off with Ottawa. That will set the stage for the KCAC tournament and how that's going to look. And, the results of that tournament is going to affect probably a number of at-large bids, right? Then you have the Sun Conference. You have Warner. You have Kaiser. I think Weber is also playing St. Thomas as well. I think that is also going to matter, as well as Warner and Kaiser, because you never know, right? You want to get a decent draw here. There are some teams that prefer others, especially in the postseason and whatnot, and I'm not going to expose who wants who, right? But there are definitely some preferences there, if I'm just being completely honest with you. And that's going to matter as well. That sets the stage for the Sun Conference tournament. I think this is fair. It's going to come down to the KCAC and the Sun, right? We're going to see who wins to first automatically qualify, and then where everyone else lies after those tournaments. And I really feel like that this weekend is almost an extension of those tournaments, because we have some great flag football games between some quality teams. All of that is going to decide at large and all that great stuff. I'm looking at the GSAC and I'm like, it really should be Hope who comes out of there. I would be extremely surprised if it's not. And if it's not, then, hey, I'm wrong. I'll admit it. It's fine. But even then, if it's a team, and let's just entertain the thought, right? If it's a team other than Hope that wins the GSAC and Hope ends up being the runner-up, go ahead and list down Hope as getting an at-large bid. And then at that point, there is a good opportunity, or probably a likely chance that, each conference, each group gets, an automatic bid with the conference winner or group winner. And then the runner-up is probably almost like an automatic bid. They're going to say at large, but the selection committee is probably going to go with whoever the runner-up is, and may not consider other teams deeper than where they are. And so that's where things get interesting. So really look out for this weekend here. The Sun Conference and KCAC, I feel like, are going to dictate who makes the NAIA Invitational. So there you go. All right, now let's talk about the other tournament that will be going down in Bradenton at the same time as the Invitational, and that's the Women's College Flag Finals hosted by RCX here. Like I said, same area over there. Let me backtrack. This tournament will be single elimination. The Invitational, the NAIA Invitational will be double elimination. Teams could have started registering for this back in February 26th, right? February 26th, I think, is when registration opens up. Now, here's the thing. If an NAIA team makes the Invitational, is selected for the Invitational, and they also signed up for this, they will be removed from consideration. Now, this was the tournament where I'm pretty sure there was a Zoom meeting about last week. So I'm just being honest right now. I'm not going to divulge anything just yet. We're trying to make sure we get all of our facts right and whatnot. And so hopefully we'll get an update next week here. But theoretically, this was what was supposed to happen. In this Women's College Flag Finals. There are going to be 20 teams in a single championship bracket here. 7 from the NAIA, non-invitational. So the teams that don't make it in will, have to be invited and whatnot. And then you have 7 teams from the NCAA. So think D1, D2, D3. You have Alabama State. You have the Conference Carolinas. You have the United East, the Atlantic East, the ECAC, the Illinois colleges, all those NCAA teams. That also includes like Northeastern teams like Roberts Wesleyan, Post, all of those squads. And then 6 teams from the NJCAA here. Now, this is what we know, what we have been told. It did sound like the JUCOs were going to do their own thing. Last we heard. Now, that could have changed as of yesterday, right? Now, if that does change, it becomes a different conversation, right? Are they still going to do 20? They definitely can. They definitely can do 20. At that point, you're looking at probably 10 NAIA, 10 NCAA, unless you want to tip the scales for NAIA, because in my opinion, there are probably more. I don't know if there are more quality teams, but there are definitely some NAIA teams who have been around for a while who maybe if you are on that committee, you want to give them the benefit of the doubt. So that makes things interesting. But just looking at it right now, assuming, let's just say JUCO stays, right? And I don't know. I don't know. I don't think the California JUCOs, they're junior colleges, I don't know if they will be considered for this. They would also have to sign up and register and all that, right? But that definitely makes things interesting. Would love to see an Irvine Valley, Saddleback, Ventura, whoever be in this tournament here. And if they are, that will be huge. That's probably 3 or 4 teams right there up for consideration. You have Pratt, you have Bryan and Stratton, who are up for consideration. That comes to mind. And then in my opinion, you have Florida Gateway and Daytona State, who, if you're allowing JUCO teams, have to have a Florida Gateway and Daytona State. I do not care. If I am the organizer of this thing and I'm really trying to look out for women's college flag football and, just put on a show that people are going to be attracted to and just really see a great showcase, I am throwing the checkbook personally at Florida Gateway and Daytona State. Have to. Because in my opinion, you look at Florida Gateway, you look at Daytona State. Well, let's start with Florida Gateway. You look at Florida Gateway. If Florida Gateway is in a tournament without some of the top NAIA teams, right? I think they win this tournament. Or at least they're the favorite to win this tournament. Now, you'll probably have some tough teams. There will be some teams that might just be left out. I could see Weber in there, and then this could definitely be a tournament that Weber could win, right? Same with either a St. Thomas or one of the leftovers that are left out from the Sun Conference. If any of those top three in the KCAC, Baker, Kansas Wesley, and Ottawa in the KCAC are left out of the Invitational, I could see any of those teams winning it, right? But assuming they all make it, I really like Florida Gateway winning it all just straight up here. Daytona State, the team most familiar with them, I would probably say that they maybe have the best chance at challenging a team like Florida Gateway, just from a logical perspective. But as of right now, I would consider that up in the air for sure. So we'll see. We'll see what happens there. Now, looking at the non-NAIA teams, I kind of talked about them, just talking about teams who are non-contenders or teams that, if they lose, then, I said lose in their conference tournament, either don't make the championship or are runner-ups, they could definitely be, left out of the Invitational. I'm looking at some of those teams that could make it in, like either a K-Dub or a Baker. Like I said, I'd be really surprised if they just left out Ottawa. But if Ottawa's left out, they're in this, and I will consider them a contender right away, in this tournament. So those are teams you could go ahead and consider. The Sun Conference, unless the committee is just goes all in on that bias and lets in Weber, St. Thomas, Life, right? I think one of those teams will make it in here, and assuming they all register, right? I'm assuming everyone's registering for this, but I don't know. We're reaching out, right? That will definitely be interesting. I think the group of 6, that group right there that don't exactly have a full conference. I'm talking about like Campbellsville, the group with Milligan, St. Francis, Siena Heights, Lindsey Wilson, Cumberland. That group will definitely be interesting to watch there. You could definitely see a number of those teams making it in here, and then that could get interesting, right? I think no matter who they select from the NAIA pool, you'll get some good teams here, and I'm sure there are players for sure, but teams that I'm missing out on that I think would really put up a good fight and could push to win this whole tournament, right? I'm thinking about like Graceland. You throw them in there. They got some talent over there as well. Siena Heights, another team that could make some noise happen. Point, has had a good season, at least comparatively. I thought they had a good season and whatnot. That could be a really interesting squad here. Just naming a few right there. Maybe one of the teams from the GSAC as well. Looking at Arizona Christian could be an interesting team if they make it in here. La Sierra could be another interesting team as well. It just goes on and on here. So we'll see what happens there. Now, just previewing the NCAA, just watching, D1 teams, watching D2, having watched D3, I really, really, really feel like, before I get into which conference I feel like will have a lot of representatives, I'm just going to put this out there. I really feel like Huntingdon is going to be a team to look out for this one, because I think they're going to finish out their schedule here. They don't play in a conference, right? But I like Huntingdon a lot, actually, going into this tournament, and I would be surprised if they were one of the NCAA teams that were not picked to make it in, honestly. I think you absolutely have to get Huntington in there. That's definitely a team that you got to consider, right? Like I said, not on the selection committee, but if I was, this is who is going through my mind right now. Huntington is an absolute must as well. Now, if we're talking about, who else I would love to see in this, I'm looking at the entire Conference Carolinas, or at least the top teams in the Conference Carolinas. And just from what I have watched, the last couple weeks here, I really, really, really love the level of play and the talent they bring. I think it also helps that a lot of these teams also played NAIA teams. I think that really helps what they got going on for them over there. But, let's just look at it right now. You got, looking at the top here, Wingate, Ferrum, Lise McRae, Barden, and Emmanuel. Just right off bat, that's 5 of the 7 NCAA teams. Assume Huntington's in there, right? That makes 6 of the 7 NCAA teams. Those are good programs. Wingate, they are hurt right now, but in conference, they are 7-1 without their starting quarterback. Insane. Got a lot of talent over there. That is also a team that pushed Ottawa early in the season and also played a Kaiser as well. Beat a Reinhardt. I think if you are an organizer of this, you cannot really afford to not have Wingate there. So there you go. And then by default, you look at the rest of these teams in the conference that have played them close or have beat them even. I'm looking at Ferrum, who right now is 14-3. Lise McRae, who not only played all these teams, but also played Florida Gateway and pushed Florida Gateway. That's something a lot of people forget about. They pushed a very good Florida Gateway team. Lise McRae is absolutely a team that I'm calling up and trying to get up in there. Barden, they're so electric. They're 9-2 right now. They had a great season here so far, and they've only played Conference Carolinas teams, but they've played well against them. I think they're 6-2 in conference, which is not bad at all, and it's not like they've been blown out in every one of those losses either. So that's absolutely, I'm just looking at the star power of Sora Rigdon, Valerie Angebata, Saren Merritt, Zania Long, just to name a few right there. Deja Reed. I think Barden absolutely got to get in there. And then I'm looking at Emmanuel as well here. They got a good young quarterback in Lillian Stevenson. Their wide receiver duo of Gwen Carter, Gianna Brown has been electric as well. On top of that, I believe they've also played some Sun Conference teams, some other NAIA teams. They're battle hardened over there, despite currently being 5th in the Conference Carolinas. That's how good this conference is. So right off the bat, I'm looking at those 5 teams, and I would be surprised if they don't reach out to them and make something work out. And then looking below, the Mount Olive King, the Mount Chowan, Mars Hill, I would all consider those teams as well. They're playing in a really tough conference where, me personally, I've been really impressed by the play of those top 5 teams. So, I would absolutely consider those teams. Now then, but that makes things interesting though, because then you got to look at the United East, the Atlantic East here. You got Marymount, right? You have Eastern as well, another team you got to consider. Immaculata you throw in there. That's the big 3 from the Atlantic East. You got to consider all those teams. I think maybe you go ahead and go with the conference winners. Same with the Conference Carolinas, and you prioritize them. But that's a very competitive conference, doing it for 2 years. You have the United East. You look at Gallaudet there. I would love to see Gallaudet compete here. I think not only would it make them better, but it would be so fun to watch here. They've been dominant the last 2 years, dominating their conference. I think Gallaudet would be amazing to see here. And then last but not least, another team that, maybe not last but not least, but last but not least in the East here, another team that's coming to mind right now, Roberts Wesleyan, currently undefeated, first-year program. You got a lot of players from New York who are playing for Roberts Wesleyan, so, you're filling a demographic right there as well, taking that New York audience and whatnot, and, they've high-key been rolling too. I'd be looking at them and I'd be like, we got to get Roberts Wesleyan out there as well. And then, you obviously have the ECAC. There's some teams to consider there. But let's go ahead and go back to the middle of the country here. You have all those Illinois colleges. Right now, Aurora would be a great team to bring out to this thing, right? I think if anything, that's probably a squad to look out for. Same with Illinois College, Illinois Wesleyan. It could get really interesting between those teams. May look to bring one of those squads in. And so, it just depends, right? We'll see what happens with the whole JUCO situation here. We'll see if they maybe expand the tournament. That could be possible. Or if they shrink it. It gets really interesting if they shrink it. We'll see what happens. But I think no matter what, that women's college flag finals is going to be electric. I really look forward to seeing who makes it there and, who's all in. And currently, we are reaching out to teams and just seeing who's registered for it. So we could get an idea of, who the selection committee will be looking at, and what that process might look like, and what games that these teams that have registered are looking to win here. Specifically NCAA and JUCO, we're looking at that right now. NAIA would help obviously as well, but I think all these NAIA teams want to be, invitational teams, right? So we'll see what happens, and if you're a coach, program, player, and you can confirm whether your team has registered for this, please reach out to us. That way we could, have a better outlook at things and do a better segment next week, really looking at all the teams that might be in play for this and get a good preview going. So there you go, but it should be good. The postseason's going to be a whole bunch of fun coming up here. Alrighty, thank you so much for rocking with us here. We're getting into some pretty serious football here. We got some legacies on the line, some performances on the line, some awards that are on the line as a result as well. Make sure you check out our social media to see who we're all considering for those awards there. And it's heating up. It's getting interesting. So thank you so much for rocking with us. Check us out at playmakerscorner.com as well as Playmakers Corner on social media. If you have any inside information or information you want to share with us, our DMs are absolutely open. And then, of course, I'm just putting this out there as well. Any collaboration ideas or posts or whatever, we will always promote women's college flag football. So just make sure you reach out to us there, and we'll get you set up well. And then shout out women's college flag football, collegiateflagfootball.com as well, who, we were able to get a lot of the information about the NAIA Invitational and women's flag finals from. Make sure you check out their sites and their social media pages. But until next time, we will catch you later.